why don't you introduce yourself? I've been following you for a couple of years now. You became pretty famous when the whole "Don't Tase Me, Bro" incident happened. You kind of created, that line that I still hear all the time, "Don't Tase Me, Bro." And it was one of the most used words in 2007. About what happened and where you are now.
Well, basically, John Kerry had come to the University of Florida campus. I was extremely interested to ask him some questions after, he ran for president, told the entire country, he's running to end the wars, which was the whole reason I supported him. I was not a fan of any of the wars. I was extremely opposed to them. So I had all these questions, and lo and behold, John Kerry is speaking at the University of Florida campus. When he shows up, I have some very serious questions for him that I asked him, and I don't think America in general had seen a politician being asked a real question in quite some time. So it caused a scene. I was shocked by how the police reacted. I couldn't believe what they were doing, to be honest. I was just stunned out of my mind that they were treating me like I was a terrorist. I mean, I'm holding a book. Holding a book and asking him questions, and the way they reacted was just insane to me.
I didn't do anything! Don't tase me, bro! Don't tase me! I didn't do anything! Ow! 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 Ow!
So that's where "Don't Tase Me, Bro" comes from.
Were you still a fan of him when you went to ask him questions?
By the time I went to ask him questions, I already was completely disenchanted. I knew that he was a disingenuous person. My goal, my intention, was to ask him real questions to expose what he is to people by his answers. And I think the fact that he really didn't have an interest in answering my questions, despite the fact that those questions then went viral worldwide. I mean, I had stories on me done from Australia, from Italy, from around the world. John Kerry never answered those questions. And you would think that somebody that, wanted to defeat George W. Bush, wanted to end the wars, would have been very interested in someone that is asking questions about why he didn't win the presidency, why he was cheated, why aren't they impeaching Bush. But you can see he was the Secretary of State under Obama for 4 years, and you can see from his policies, he was never any different than George W. Bush. And that's what I was extremely furious to figure out, and what I wanted other people to understand. He was never any different than George W. Bush. He didn't care about ending the wars. If he did, by the time he was Secretary of State, he wouldn't have been giving support basically to ISIS and funding war in the Middle East. The Democrats were no different than the Republicans. And right now, you can see the neoconservatives, the war hawks, they were supporting Hillary Clinton. So there was never any difference between the Democrats and the Republicans in the mainstream. They're both owned by the same people, the same bakers, the same corporations, the same military-industrial complex.
A lot of people are afraid that Trump may be a racist. Do you think Trump is a racist?
He was called a friend by Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, two of the biggest leaders in the African American community for decades, and they have made a career out of calling many people racist. They never called Donald Trump a racist. They called him their friend, and a friend to minority businesses. It's strange to call somebody that you say is a friend of minority businesses a racist all of a sudden after knowing him for decades. That just stinks of a political maneuver. That's all it is. He's not a racist.
So what about the whole sexist thing after his comments about women?
It's so funny, all of these things that they call him, there are decades of evidence that he's the exact opposite. He was hiring women to be executives in his corporation in the 70s when nobody was hiring women in those kind of positions. He was a maverick in actually breaking the glass ceiling and hiring women to be executives. Barbara Rez, who was an executive for him for a long time, had a position that no woman in the world ever had, overseeing the building of a skyscraper. No other woman ever had that position until Trump put her in that position. Does that sound like someone that's a sexist to you?
I hear that he's homophobic. What's your thoughts on that?
That's another one that's amazing to me, because the Republican Party for the longest time you could make an actual argument that they were homophobic. Oh, they don't want gays to get married, which is, a strange thing when you look at it legally. Like, how does a gay person getting married affect your marriage? Trump has already said gay marriage has been litigated by the Supreme Court. I don't want to talk about it. It's very obvious he's not interested in rolling back gay marriage at all. He's not that kind of Republican. And at the Republican National Convention, he had a gay man, Peter Thiel, on stage at the convention, and Peter Thiel, big Trump supporter, said, I'm a gay man, I'm here supporting Donald Trump. He got an ovation, a standing ovation. When at a GOP conference would a gay man get an ovation for saying that he's gay before Trump? Never happened. Never.
Do you think Trump has hatred towards Muslims, the whole Islamophobia thing?
No. That's the most insane thing to me of all, because people are calling this a Muslim ban right now. 85% of the world's Muslims have no restriction placed on them by what he just did, and the countries on that list were actually designed by the Obama administration. So does that make the Obama administration Islamophobic? Do they hate Muslims? Because they made the list. That came from them. So
and Obama did have a ban for a while before. Is that correct?
From different countries, yes, because sometimes those countries are dangerous at this point. And a lot of it has to do with the U.S. foreign policy. People don't like to get into this subject on any side of the aisle, it seems. But the U.S. has, Ron Paul used to talk about this all the time. The U.S. has created blowback. Our government has supported overthrowing countries all over the Middle East for decades. In the 50s, Iran had a democratically elected leader named Mohammad Mossadegh. The U.S. went in there with the CIA, overthrew him, and gave them the bloody dictator, the Shah of Iran. So the U.S. foreign policy has been creating a lot of this terrorism. People have accused me of hating Muslims a lot recently. I've never said a bad word about Muslims or Islam in my life. What I have said is that right now, the current wave of migrants coming from Syria, Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq, the countries on the list, this current wave of migrants has a lot of hatred for the West, a lot of hatred for America. They've been radicalized, and they want to rape and kill and do violent crime in the West.
But what about
the majority to bring them here.
What about the majority of good people that are coming, that need, they're real refugees that need help? What do you think about that?
Trump has always said there will be vetting, we're not going to let any Muslims into the country. That's what he's been saying for a long time, is it's going to be extreme vetting. Vetting. That means the people that need to come in, they're going to be let in the country. But the adult males with ISIS flags on their phones are not going to be let into the country. And there's a good reason for that, because when you look at Europe, in Paris just now, they're blowing up cars. Women in the West like to talk about, we make $1 less an hour than men, which is not true, by the way. That's actually not true. When you look at if they're in the same position, they're not making any less. They're conflating the statistics with that. But there's a lot of anger about making $1 less. Imagine if your word is worth half as much in court, and that's just one thing. That's just one thing. Sharia law is not by any stretch of the imagination good for women, and it's not compatible with the U.S. Constitution or Western democracy. And again, I have no problem with Muslim immigration. I have friends that are Muslims. They're great people. But not every Muslim is the same. Just like the Westboro Baptist Church that goes and holds up signs that say, God hates fags. That's what's on the sign. Okay. They don't represent most Christians, but those people still consider themselves Christians. But the overall point is, yes, there are good Muslim people that would be happy to follow the Constitution and would be perfectly fine coming to the U.S. Less than 1% of the migrants in Germany has a job. Okay. I understand you can say, they have a lot of disadvantages. It's not fair to point to that. Anybody can get a job doing yard work. You don't need to speak German or English to do yard work. Okay. There's a lot of people coming over to these countries that are trying to do harm, and that's all it is. It's not the fact that they're Muslim. If they were Buddhist, if they were Hindu, if they were Jewish, if they were Christian, and a lot of them had the flag of an organization on their phone that is dedicated to the destruction of the country that they're going to, it wouldn't be a good idea to bring them there. That's it.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
actually, what Trump has said is he wants to build safe zones in the Middle East for these refugees. I'm all about pragmatism. What's the best thing for everyone? So that a mass wave of migration coming to the United States obviously isn't good for the United States. If you look at what's happening in Sweden and in Germany with the unbelievable amount of rape and crime, and you could look at just one incident in Cologne, Germany on New Year's a year ago or 2 years ago, where there are 1,000 sexual assaults reported and a mass incident. You know, it's not good to bring people that hate you to your country. Okay, so they should not come here en masse. All right, so where should they go if it's not safe in various parts of Syria? Well, who are their neighbors? But at the same time, I think Saudi Arabia has to pitch in a ton of money for this, actually. Saudi Arabia also helped create ISIS, and they've been benefiting from the globalist regime in the U.S. for decades. They can take in plenty of refugees. They have lots of money that they have built off of the people of the U.S. They can definitely afford it. So Saudi Arabia can pay for the refugees.
Well, we know that Saudi Arabia and other Middle Eastern countries that can afford it are refusing to do anything. And another thing.
Well,
go ahead.
I don't know if you've seen the news. There's already a report. You can look this up. Daily Caller, King Salman, I believe, of Saudi Arabia, they agreed to create safe zones in the Middle East. You can look it up. It's already been agreed upon. When they follow it up and how it comes about and who exactly pays for it, we'll see how that all gets worked out. But I predict you're going to see Saudi Arabia pitching in to help make safe zones in the Middle East. The last thing I want to say on that is that just by not supporting ISIS anymore, which the U.S. has been doing under the table covertly for a long time, just by not supporting ISIS, you're going to see safe zones in Syria. They just need ISIS to not be there. And if you look at, you can look at the Twitter feed of a reporter in Syria. Gosh, I wish I remembered her name. It's something like Sarah Haxo, something like that. She's showing now that Trump is in office and we're not protecting ISIS with our Air Force and such, people are returning to the cities in Syria and having actual life continue on. They had Christmas. They let the Christians celebrate Christmas. Yep. They're having all kinds of events. The Russians are giving out things, and things are functioning again. Just now that the U.S. isn't supporting ISIS and the terrorism there. So you're going to see a safe zone return just by the U.S. not supporting proxy armies like ISIS.
So why would you say that the U.S. was supporting ISIS? That sounds like a conspiracy theory to me.
Oh, you can see it in Hillary's own emails in the WikiLeaks. They got caught. They got caught big time. They've been giving them money and they've been giving them weapons. When Trump said that Hillary and Obama created ISIS, he was just saying their failed policies created ISIS. But I believe he also was saying, for the people that know, they really did create ISIS.
Why would and Obama, why would
they really did help create ISIS. It's not.
Why would they benefit? Why would they do that to their country?
Well, let's take a look at Libya, for example, where ISIS is in control right now. Before ISIS was in control, Muammar Gaddafi was in control. The U.S. didn't like Muammar Gaddafi because he wasn't going to trade oil in dollars anymore. He was going to trade oil in a new pan-African currency that he created that was going to benefit Africa. Say what you will about Muammar Gaddafi being a bloody dictator, but the people of Libya had it a lot better under him than they do now under ISIS. And the U.S., they didn't like Gaddafi, so they got rid of him. ISIS is now running the country. If they didn't want ISIS to run the country, they would get rid of them. But they didn't get rid of them because ISIS is a proxy force for the globalist deep state military industrial complex controlling the oil for the globalists. That's it. Saudi Arabia gave $25 million for Hillary to get elected. Everybody likes to pretend that Trump is owned by Russia somehow. And then they conveniently ignore, Hillary got 25 million from Saudi Arabia. She has a history of being real close with the communist regime in China, who she wanted to help pass the TPP for, which would have exported even more U.S. jobs to China, to their slave labor. So funny, you know, a lot of libertarians like to say, oh, you can't tax things coming into the U.S. That's against the free market. How do you have a free market when you're importing slave labor? You can't compete in a free market with slave labor. They didn't pay them anything to make the stuff. No matter how much of a free market you have, if you have people willing to work for 10 cents an hour, you don't have a free market. You don't have a libertarian society if you're importing slave-made goods. And what people don't understand, in communist China, China burned the farms of millions of farmers. They had no choice but to go to the cities and work. There's no free market when you're a slave. And those people working for 10 cents, oh yeah, they could choose to work in the factories or not. Well, they could choose to work in the factories or die because their farms were burned. They have no means of subsistence. They can't live without working in those slave factories. I mean, they had to put nets around one of the Apple factories in China, a Foxconn factory, because people were jumping to their death so often, they had to put nets around the building.
Wow.
There's no, yeah.
So going back to Trump, what do you think about the wall? A lot of people are really angry with the idea of the wall, and they think it's, you know, it's mistreatment to a lot of Mexicans. They think it's a waste of money. They think it's not realistic. What do you think about that?
Well, people need to understand the purpose of the wall. Why does he even want this? Is it because he hates Mexicans? No, he does not hate Mexicans. The number one reason that the wall is a thing is because illegal immigrants, and it has been conservatively estimated that there are 30 million illegal immigrants in the United States. Illegal immigrants are willing to work for less money. It's a fact. And when you have illegal immigrants willing to work for $5 an hour, you know, a lot of the people on the left like to talk about a $15 minimum wage. You're not going to get $15 an hour in a factory when they have people willing to work for $5 under the table. You're not going to, and especially you're not going to get $15 an hour when your job can be replaced by a robot. That's a whole other story. But there's not going to be real wages there when people are willing to work for less. So the wall is completely necessary to prevent immigrants willing to work under the table. And once you have the wall and you have an enforced e-verify system where employers are not actually employing illegal immigrants anymore, these people are already self-deporting. They're leaving. And it's, you know, I know it's very a lot of people on the left look at things in terms of fairness, and it's very unfair. The U.S., which has gone overseas and done so many terrible things, and everybody here is rich and they want their wages, and now you're going to kick out these poor people that the only way they can make any money is to come here and try and work under the table. Well, guess what? Nobody's going to have anything if you follow the globalist plan. Everybody would be poor. Americans, Mexicans, the whole world, Chinese, everybody's going to be poor if you follow the globalist plan. That's what they want. They want all of the money for like 10 people and everyone else be poor. That's what they want. When you have real wages in America, a real middle class, that middle class in America will give money to the rest of the world. Imagine being on an airplane that's crashing and all the oxygen masks come down. Okay, you have to put on your own oxygen mask first. If you don't, you can't help anybody else. You're going to run out of oxygen and die. God forbid. You know? The U.S. economy is failing. Trump just gave it a boost. The only way it's going to keep going is with the things that he's going to do. Taxing imports from slave countries, putting up a wall, kicking out people willing to work for less than minimum wage because they're illegal. You know? And it sucks for them. But if they go back to Mexico, Mexico can build a real economy. But when they have an escape hatch, all right, well, Mexico sucks, just come to the United States. And the U.S. can help them in certain ways. But one of the ways is not by importing a quarter of their population. It's not going to make them any better off. It's just going to impoverish it's going to be a race to the bottom, and everybody in the U.S. will be poor. There'll be no middle class here and no middle class there. We need a middle class here, and we need to help them build the middle class there in the way that we can do it. But importing all of their workforce, that's not going to help them, and it's not going to help us. It's just going to make everybody poor.
Okay, so yeah, so one question right now though is you have the situation where you have a lot of Mexicans where their kids were born here, where I mean it's a sensitive topic. What do you do with that?
I don't think he's going to deport 11 million people or whatnot. I don't think it's going to happen. I think he's the first thing he's going to do, which he always said, is go after the violent gangs, which he's already started doing in California. He went after human traffickers in California. If you're a violent criminal, I don't think anybody has a problem with you being deported. So he's going after the violent criminals. And once the wall is up and E-Verify is in place, people are going to self-deport, because if you can't get work because, I don't have papers, I can't get work, they're going to leave. I mean, it sucks that economic hardship exists, but like I said, if everybody's poor, it's not good for anybody.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I think in the near future we're going to have such extreme technological advances. I think the whole world is going to get rich pretty quick.
Well, do you want to just share a little bit about that? That's an interesting statement. I've never heard that before.
Well, for one example, what's the wealth of the world predicated on right now to a large extent? It's oil.
Yeah.
The whole world runs on oil, and if you own the oil, you own billions and billions and billions of dollars. Well, there have been alternative energy technologies suppressed for decades. And Trump has no vested interest in suppressing these things. The military-industrial complex, a large part of it was the oil industry. And people will run and say, but Trump put the CEO of ExxonMobil as his Secretary of State. Well, you don't know what that guy's personal opinions are. Anyone that wants to make a lot of money in the United States and move up through a corporate ladder, you got to do what the corporation wants you to do. That doesn't necessarily make Rex Tillerson an evil person. But Trump is not beholden to ExxonMobil. He doesn't make his money from the oil industry. Barack Obama, George W. Bush, Hillary Clinton, those people were all beholden to the globalists that are in a big business club with the oil industry. They all meet up at Bilderberg. They meet up at the Council on Foreign Relations, and they're all about oil. Trump I know he just approved some pipelines. I know he did that, but he has no personal vested interest in oil. I think down the road, he's going to find out with the alternative energy technology, he's going to have no interest in suppressing it, and the whole world is going to be rich. When you can make energy, from a device that you personally own and better than solar. People like the idea of solar, the dream of solar. There's better things out there than solar that has just been suppressed. And I think when those things are allowed out into the world, the whole world's going to get rich pretty quick. I think that you're going to see very amazing things come out under Trump just because they were suppressed before. The FDA has been under the thumb of the big pharmaceutical companies for a long time. So let's say somebody invented a cure for cancer, that would put out of business a lot of pharmaceuticals, chemotherapy drugs, radiation. So now that the FDA is not necessarily controlled by big pharma anymore, I think we might see things like cures for cancer. I think you're going to see unbelievable things come out from this administration just because he's not being paid by them. He doesn't care. You've got cures for cancer. Let's see it. I think you're going to see a lot of things come to light.
One thing you said boldly, and I was shocked, you put on social media, Trump will win and you will see. And you said that a few months ago when everyone and every news outlet, every media outlet said Hillary's going to win, and everyone was confident that Hillary's winning. And you boldly said Trump is going to win. And I remember looking at him like, man, Andrew's pretty bold, but he's out of touch with what's happening in America. And you were right. How did you figure that out?
Everybody has certain gifts. Some people are so good at basketball that people will pay thousands of dollars just to watch them for 3 hours. Okay? I have always seen what's the trends that are happening globally. When I was 10 years old, I said that George W. Bush was going to be the next president, and this is in 1998, before he was announced as a candidate or anything. I saw him on TV. I saw him in an ABC piece. I said, oh, he's the son of George Bush. They're promoting him already. He's going to be the next president. And he was. All right? I was like 10. Okay?
Wow.
I saw that Amazon.com stock around the same age. I was like 10. I saw Amazon.com stock was like $12, and I'm like, so if they're selling stuff online, they're the biggest people doing this. This is going to be worth a lot of money. And I told my dad to buy this $12 stock. He didn't listen to me because I was 10 or whatever. But the next year it was worth like $240. Okay?
Wow. Yeah.
In 2004, when John Kerry was running at the Democratic National Convention, I saw a speaker named Barack Obama. I said, this guy, they're gonna have him run for president next, and he's gonna win. He's your next president. And Barack Obama won. I have seen the trends, and what people in the mainstream didn't see is that there were millions of people, literally millions, showing up live to Trump rallies, going out, trekking hundreds of miles to go and see the guy, and he represented something which had been a building movement. Ron Paul, who I voted for twice, and I never really believed he would win. I optimistically hoped he would win, but I really knew that he was not going to win. He built a big movement that was growing and growing of people that saw the manipulation of the economy by the Federal Reserve, the complete shutdown of anything good by the government, and that there needed to be a real government for the people. And Trump was the manifestation of what was building for decades. Before Ron Paul, Ross Perot, a populist, somebody for the people that wanted to help the American people. We haven't had a president like that. I used to say since Kennedy, but actually it was the first year of Reagan. And I didn't like Reagan's administration, and now I know why. Reagan ran for the people. They shot him after a year. He was shot by a guy named Hinckley that was probably brainwashed by the CIA. There's a declassified program. This exists. This is not conspiracy theory. This is real. You can look it up. MK Ultra, brainwashing people so that they can go and do crazy things like shoot Ronald Reagan and say it's because it's for their love of Jodie Foster. What kind of crazy story is that? Okay? That was the real story. That's the official story of how Reagan got shot.
Yep.
Or no, he got shot. He got shot because he was doing things for the American people. And after that, George W. Bush, who had run the CIA, got made the vice president and ran the show. Okay? So we haven't had a real president for the American people since like 1980, before I was born.
And you're saying everything else since now has been planned and organized, and Trump broke the system, basically.
That's why people on the left and the right still hate him. He's president now. You would think that the Republicans would coalesce around him. Oh, we're in power. Yay, Republicans. No. Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell, and all of the Republicans in the Congress that are beholden to these big business interests, they hate Trump. They say bad things about him all the time. They're not repealing Obamacare. They're not doing tax cuts. They're doing literally nothing because they want to get rid of Trump. They would backstab him the first chance they got if they could. These people are not for America. They're not. Saying Democrats are evil or Republicans is evil, these are just labels. There's honest people on both sides, like Tulsi Gabbard, who's a Democrat. She just went to Syria and said there's no such thing as moderate rebels, that the U.S. was funding ISIS and that it was terrible. Dennis Kucinich, who's one of the last honest Democrats that's in the media, he was just saying how the deep state and the CIA, they're actively trying to overthrow Trump, and it's a terrible thing, and they want World War III with Russia. That's what's going on.
So how do you think he's going to survive the next 4 years if both parties are against him and the media is against him? Do you think he can make it?
So a guy named Roger Stone, who was involved in the Trump campaign right at the beginning, I heard him tell a story about how Trump was supposed to get on a helicopter, but he didn't at the last minute. The helicopter crashed. Trump survived because he wasn't on the flight. And Roger Stone knew at that moment that Trump was meant for big things. I believe in God, and I believe Trump is literally has a mission. He's protected to help save the West and help bring peace. I don't believe that he's the Messiah or anything like that, but I do believe that he is being divinely protected to bring peace, because Hillary Clinton literally would have started World War III with Russia. She would have imported a million migrants, and whatever percentage of that you want to say is ISIS or hates the West, let's say it's 0.01%. So how many thousands of ISIS fighters would that have been in the United States? And it only takes one of them to do what happened in San Bernardino. Thousands of fighters, at least, in the U.S., doing bombings, raping. It would have been the end of the United States. World War III with Russia abroad, people raping and killing us in this country, God forbid, it's not going to happen. And she was against free speech. She was completely against free speech. That would have been the end of the country, okay? Trump is definitely being given divine help. That's it.
Democrats typically push for help for those groups of people, whether it's housing vouchers, whether it's food stamps, whether it's different programs, and they're really concerned that those things are going to be taken away from those who need it. And they look at Hillary or Obama and Democrats as those helpers to the poor and the oppressed. Would you say that's true, and how can we change that with the Republicans?
I think that the only difference between how the Republicans would do it and the Democrats would do it, the poor people are going to get helped either way. But with the Democrats, it's with the government taking money through taxes and then spending it through administrative fees that are used inefficiently through government. You have layers and layers of welfare offices and people auditing the welfare offices and supervisors and blah, 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 blah. Very expensive versus people just giving money out of the goodness of their heart under Trump's administration because they're going to have more money. And I would say this also, for the people that want a strong social net, welfare and public housing and such, how could you possibly have welfare and public housing and open borders? You think the U.S. could literally afford to take in the poor of the entire world, all of Mexico, all of Central America, all of South America, all of the Middle East, all of Southeast Asia? Everybody, come on in. You're broke. Come to the United States. We're going to build you houses and give you free food. The U.S. is wealthy, but I don't think we're that wealthy. Larry Elder, who is an amazing speaker and a black man, I believe he was a protege of Larry King. He talks all the time about how when he was a kid, they came knocking on his parents' door and said, hey, you want to get welfare? All you got to do is, you have to be a single parent household. So, if you get rid of the husband, you can get welfare. So welfare not only has destroyed the work ethic for a lot of people, but what it's done is destroyed a lot of families. Because, if I'm single, then the government will give me money. Versus if I'm married, I got to put up with this guy, and maybe I'm mad at the guy right now. So you know what? I'll get rid of him, and I'll just get this money.
Yeah, I remember one time with housing, I showed a rental in a pretty struggling neighborhood, and it was a female there that was just talking about how she had the amount of children she can have as a single mom that will maximize the governmental assistance, and she kind of planned that to have that. And it was so eye-opening to me because, when you have a single mom with so many kids, it's a struggle. And I think the perfect number is like 5 or something.
So the last time the Democratic Party helped maximize the amount of children people had for economic purposes, it was called slavery. They bred people to make money, okay? And these policies, which you just said, people, if I have this many children, I'll get this much money, okay? They're giving people the illusion of choice when really they're in another kind of slavery to the government. It's another form of slavery. It's another form of the plantation. And these people that are in this system, and they've got invisible shackles on. They don't realize that the government, the Democrats, are making them slaves in the way they're setting up the system. It's terrible. It's a terrible thing.
What would you say to people that are legitimately afraid? And then my second question follow-up would be, what would you say to the Republicans that voted for him and love him right now where they are?
So the people that love Trump, great. I'm glad you love Trump. But you have to realize Trump isn't going to do all of the work for you. You got to hold him accountable. Even Steve Bannon in his cabinet said that. Because there's a lot of people that are trying to push Trump to do the wrong thing. But if you have a groundswell of support, demanding that we get these tax cuts, demanding that Obamacare is repealed and replaced with something that's good, and holding your representatives accountable, because if there's someone in Congress that says he's a Republican but doesn't support the agenda that helps you, that you voted for Trump for, then you got to get rid of that guy. Like Paul Ryan, he has a primary opponent named Paul Nehlen up in Minnesota. Nobody should be voting for Paul Ryan. Everybody should be voting for Paul Nehlen. Get rid of the people that aren't going to do anything good, okay? So for the Trump people, you got to stay vigilant. He didn't win because you did nothing. He won because you really did everything. You got to keep doing everything. And for the people that are afraid of Trump, which I don't necessarily believe that they're afraid, if you were really afraid of Trump, would you be on Facebook and Twitter and everything calling him a Nazi and saying that he's evil and racist? Because, when people are afraid of a government database, back in actual Nazi Germany, whatever, they were afraid to be put on the list of, Jews or dissenters or whatever. If you're really afraid, I don't think speaking out on Facebook and calling the guy Orange Cheeto Hitler or whatever people call him, I don't think they're really afraid. I think a lot of people are afraid of looking stupid when he turns out to not be Hitler, okay? Because they've been tricked by the media to thinking he's Hitler. They've been tricked by celebrities, mainstream media, all the blogs that are not actual alternative media. They've been tricked. They're really afraid. But at this point, they don't want to see the evidence. They don't want to see it. Like, oh, wait a minute. He's not a Nazi? He's not Hitler? He hasn't done anything Hitlerish at all? He banned some people with an order that was really designed under the Obama administration. So, the evidence is going to pile up. I think in about a year's time, nobody's going to be calling him Hitler anymore because they're going to see that nothing he's done is by Hitler. I think it's going to naturally, just untangle itself. So if you're afraid that Trump is Hitler, why? What is he doing? Hitler killed millions of people. Trump has not killed millions of people. He doesn't want to kill millions of people. How is deporting someone the same as killing them? I think if the Jews in Germany had been given a choice, hey, we're going to kill all of you or you're going to be deported, and then they were all deported, I don't think we'd use the word Hitler the way we do, okay? So Trump isn't Hitler. It's really stupid and juvenile to call him Hitler. And all the arguments that he is Hitler, it's just brainwash.
Thanks so much, Andrew. If people want to reach out or follow you or learn more, where do they go?
Check me out on Twitter, twitter.com/theandrewmeyer. I have a website that is laying dormant for now, theandrewmeyer.com, but you can check it out, poke around. I have a list of really good news sites on the sidebar, so you can see where I get a lot of my information. A lot of information. You got to read books. You got to read books to get the good stuff. And people don't want to read books these days. But if you really want to, get the good stuff, you got to read some books.
Any books you would recommend?
One of the books that taught me a lot about what's going on in the world is Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins. It's just it's the military-industrial complex that President Eisenhower, who was a Republican, warned about, and President Kennedy was killed by, and he was a Democrat. So, it's not about Republican-Democrat. It's about, are you for the people or are you being paid by these horrible pirates?
Sounds good, man. All right, I appreciate it. And hey, if you ever predict a really good stock like you did with Amazon, please let me know. I'll buy.
I see generational shifts. I don't necessarily see it on a day-to-day basis, but I will say it's probably a good idea to own some Bitcoin and some gold and silver.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I heard too. Sounds good. All right. Thanks, man.
Great talking to you. Love to do it again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely.